When he wasn't playing guitar for Motley Crue, our hero Gottfried Leibniz was doing some really important work in philosophy and mathematics, actually. You can thank him for calculus. Unless you hate calculus, then you don't have to thank him. In particular, Leibniz was interested in this reasoning that Descartes had used to arrive at very fundamental truths about ultimate reality, what exists and how it exists. And Gottfried Leibniz was really intrigued by this idea that you might be able to arrive at fundamental truths about reality without having any observation or having to do any kind of experiences or experiments of things. Now, what Leibniz was kind of triggered by, though, was that others had also used Descartes' thinking in ways that Leibniz didn't like. So Spinoza in particular came forward and looked at Descartes' metaphysical structure that included God and all of creation. And Spinoza said, look, the God thing doesn't really make sense. The relation between God and reality doesn't make sense. So why don't we just kind of substitute out a traditional God and in its place put more of sort of a pantheistic view of reality. Leibniz didn't dig that. So Leibniz wanted to see, can I also come up with some very fundamental metaphysical truths simply by reasoning my way to them? And so the question for Leibniz is, what has to be true? Not what else has to be true, just what has to be true. And for Leibniz, the question was, how do I discover this? And he's not going to use Descartes' methodological doubt. Instead, he's going to intuit things. He's going to deduce things. What would have to be true? Okay. Now, what's important to remember as we start looking at Leibniz's work here is that it's not real clear in the initial stages where he would be going. It was sort of like Descartes feeling trapped in this mind that he wasn't sure how to body, and he wasn't sure could even do things like mathematics because he couldn't prove that he wasn't possessed by an evil demon. And so Descartes had to kind of build on a number of ideas. First was, do I have any innate ideas? And remember, he comes up with this idea like, yeah, substance, thingness, identicalness, sameness. These are all concepts that I have in my mind, clearly, but I've never had any experiences of those things because nothing perfect or identical to something else exists. So I have these innate ideas. Well, let's look at this other innate idea I have, perfection, and where it came from. And so you can see him kind of building on this. Well, Leibniz is going to do something similar, where he's going to establish some fundamental truths and then just kind of keep building on those. So the first truth or principle that Leibniz lays out is called the principle of identity. And essentially it works like this. Leibniz says, look, we make statements about the way that things are all the time, but not all statements are the same. In fact, Leibniz says, I'm going to take propositions, which are statements that are either true or false, and I'm going to divide them into two different types. One type is going to be analytic propositions. These are propositions that are true by definition. Okay, in other words, they're true merely by the words that are used to define them. So you think about like ink pens are a handheld writing instrument. That's what ink pens are. It's true by definition. They're necessary. Their opposites would be self-contradictions. They can't be false. And a good example of this is Descartes' statement, I exist. I don't exist would be a contradictory statement, Descartes says, because in order to doubt your existence, you first have to exist. Okay? So these analytic statements, they're true by definition, they're necessary, and they're a priori. Okay? In other words, we can know that they're true simply by reason and not experience. So some examples of analytic propositions might be things like, all bachelors are men. 2 + 3 = 5. It's either A or it's not A, right? So it's either raining outside right now or it's not raining outside right now. These are statements that have to be true, and they're true not by observation, but by reason, right? So when I make a statement like it's either raining outside or it's not raining outside, I don't have to verify whether that statement is true by looking outside to see if it's raining or not. It's true by definition. There are these other types of statements, though, that Leibniz says. They're called synthetic. These are not true by definition. Okay, what that means is that whether or not these statements are true kind of depends on the way that things are. They're not necessarily true. They're what we would call contingent. It could be false if the situation were different. So there's a statement that I could make to you right now, which is, I'm standing in my house downstairs. And right now, that's a true statement. It doesn't have to be true because maybe in an hour, I will no longer be standing downstairs in my house, and that same statement will now be false, right? But with analytic propositions, they're always true. They can't be false. But synthetic ones, they're contingent. Whether they're true or false just depends on the way that things are. And they're also a posteriori. In other words, their truth or their falsity is known by observation. So when I say to you something like, there's a cat on the mat, or Biden is president of the United States, or Leibniz is dead, there's no way to reason your way to the truth or falsity of those statements. You have to check. Look at the mat. Is there a cat on it? If there is, that statement's true. But if there's not, then that statement's false. Biden's president of the U.S., that statement is true today as I'm making this video. But who knows? Maybe the dude drops dead tomorrow and then he's no longer the president. Or maybe somehow this video survives, 3 more years and he doesn't win the next election or chooses not to run, and that statement becomes false, right? So these are synthetic propositions. And this is Leibniz's first step. I'm going to establish that there are 2 different types of statements we can make about reality. And then I'm going to build on that to see if I can come up with more true statements about reality.